Oh, it is. It is another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We are locked and loaded today, man. We're coming off a UFC pay-per-view that wasn't actually a pay-per-view last weekend with 2 title fights, including the light heavyweight title changing hands. We are heading into a weekend where there is an actual for money UFC pay-per-view with 2 titles on the line. And we also have a huge boxing bout this weekend with one of the greats of all time, Canelo Alvarez, taking on Caleb Plant. This is 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And I want to remind everybody that 5 Rounds is served by my spot, man, the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Oh, I was just at the Quarterdeck a couple of days ago, and I had an awesome lunch out there. I built my own poke bowl, fresh tuna, brown rice, avocado, the spicy ponzu sauce. Dude, the fish is so fresh. I was even thinking, man, the tuna that I had on that poke bowl was exceptionally fresh on that day. The seafood is always fresh at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Whether you want to enjoy the fresh mahi, you want to enjoy the buffalo shrimp. Oh, my God, they are so good. It's right out of the ocean at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. If you're not a seafood lover, so many options for you. The All-American Burger is absolutely elite. I love it. The French dip sandwich, the jerk chicken sandwich. They have awesome pasta dishes and salads at the Quarterdeck. The key lime cheesecake is a fantastic dessert. It is the perfect way to finish every meal. Now, as you guys know, those who watch this show, the Quarterdeck is your spot to watch every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge. Are you looking for a place to watch UFC 268 this weekend, those 2 title fights, and you don't necessarily want to pay 70 freaking bucks to order it at home? Make the Quarterdeck your home for the night. Go out to the Quarterdeck, enjoy the great food, the drink specials. 2-for-1 happy hour is all day, every day, and you pay no cover charge to watch UFC 268 or any UFC pay-per-view at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. And my friends, I want to remind you, we're going to have a little community event out at the Quarterdeck Sawgrass location right by FLA Live Arena where the Florida Panthers play, formerly the BB&T Center. We're going to be having a watch party, a 5 Reasons Sports event at the Quarterdeck Sawgrass this coming Monday. We are only 4 days away. I'm so excited to head out there. Quarterdeck Sawgrass will be watching the Miami Heat on the road at the Denver Nuggets. We'll be watching Monday Night Football. We're going to be knocking down drinks. We're going to be slinging appetizers all over the place. It is going to be such a good time. So if you want to find the location nearest to you or peep their menu before you go, visit them on the web at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. And, man, it's going to be a great time at the Quarterdeck this Saturday night. Let me introduce my co-hosts as always. First, let's go downstairs to James Walker. James, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I actually had some business travel this week. Flew into New Jersey, flew back, just got in at like 2 a.m. Last night, but still have enough energy to do the show, so I'm ready to go.
Wow, I mean, between you and Frank goes to Jersey all the time as well. Like, I feel like I'm the only one of us who doesn't go out to Jersey. So glad to have you back in town, James. Frank Zaffere, of course, with us as well. Frank, how are you?
I'm doing great. Let's get into it, buddy. We got to cover last week's fights. We got to cover a big pay-per-view card Saturday. And by the way, I think somebody's boxing Saturday night too.
Yeah, certain somebody.
Somebody.
And he is a huge favorite, anywhere between minus 900 to minus 1,000, talking about Canelo, depending on which sports book you go to. It's one of those things. And obviously, I encourage everyone to go to America's favorite sports book, betus.com. But yeah, I think this is one of those fights. You'd probably have to be crazy to plop down $900 to try to win 100 back. Look for props, right? Look for maybe a mid-round finish. Look for Canelo to win the fight by stoppage is probably what you're going to be looking for. We're going to get into that. Jim Rodriguez, J-Rod, who is actually out in Vegas to cover the fights, the boxing event. He's going to join us around 7 o'clock, 7:15. At some point between 6:30 to 7. I'm giving him a loose time window because he's at the barber shop. We'll see how quickly he can get that fade done or what. I don't have any hair, so I don't know what the haircuts are these days. Whatever he's getting done to his head. Dean Thomas, our good pal, former pro fighter, 9-time UFC veteran, UFC commentator, coach to the stars. He's going to be joining us some point between 6:30 and 7 o'clock tonight. Let's jump into UFC 268 before we look back at 267. You've got rematches on this card, guys, in the 2 biggest fights here. We'll start with the main event. Kamaru Usman, who is knocking on that George St. Pierre door, right? I mean, he's not too far away from, as George St. Pierre did many years ago, not only cleaning out the welterweight division, you can argue Kamaru has done that already, but cleaning out the welterweight division twice. Like that is what Kamaru is doing. He's facing Colby Covington for the second time. And, Colby stuck to his guns. He didn't want to fight until he got this rematch. He's got this rematch. The last time they fought, guys, you could strongly argue 2 rounds apiece heading into the 5th round. Colby Covington was having a lot of success in that fight, and it was a striking-only fight. You take guys who were both, in the case of Usman and Covington, incredibly successful college wrestlers, and they either made a conscious decision to let's just duke it out, or maybe they thought it's going to be too taxing to try to take this other guy down. They canceled out their strengths. Now, both of them also good punchers. Kamaru Usman packs more power in his hands. Colby Covington also a pretty efficient pressure boxer, and obviously you can see both men having success in that fight. So Usman versus Covington part 2. Usman has shown us he's good in rematches. I mean, you saw second time he fought Masvidal, absolutely destroyed him. So, Frank, let me start with you on this one. And before we start picking winners, guys, Frank, first tell me, when you have 2 decorated wrestlers who didn't wrestle whatsoever in the first affair, do you think it's going to go like that again? Or do you think they're going to switch up? At least one of them will switch up the game plan and start working for takedowns.
Well, I think what you can do is you can just look at, what happened in the first fight, and then what you can predict what needs to happen, right, moving forward. Kamaru Usman, his boxing has improved, and notably, and he can now unleash that power more successfully. Just ask George Masvidal about that.
Yeah.
So I expect that he's going to want to stay standing. Why waste time trying to wrestle Colby? He's probably not going to get the takedown, and look to land the power shot. If you're Colby, yeah, the volume striking works. And by the way, when he went into the first fight, that was a great strategy. Just try to tune him up with that, especially with that jab that he's got. But this time, Colby, really, when you break it down, the one advantage, and it's a slim advantage, but the one advantage that I think he has, because these two match up, I think, very closely. One advantage he has is he's got a little more cardio, only because he's a little less muscled. He doesn't cut as much weight.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see Colby mixing it up. Not going necessarily for a takedown, but grappling, pressuring, acting like it, making Kamaru defend everything. If he could do that successfully, he might be able to take a little of the oomph out of those punches and gas Kamaru a little bit. And then when you get into the 3rd and particularly 4th and 5th round, then I think you see a repeat of the first fight. But this time, if Colby's successful, it'll be a victory for him with Kamaru a little tired. I think if you see Kamaru Usman win, I think it's going to be early, and it'll be a thunderous shot.
The way I see this is that Colby lost, so it's on him to make the adjustments. If Kamaru wants to fight the same fight and stand up for 5 rounds, especially considering he's gotten considerably better in his stand-up in the last 18 months, he'll probably win the fight if it's the same kind of fight. I think Colby is going to put his ego aside, which is a big one, at least in his act, in his shtick, and put his ego aside and mix it up more. Now, something that's never talked about is levels of wrestling. If a guy is a wrestler, doesn't matter if he's D2, D3, D1, whatever, they say he's a wrestler and they assume all wrestlers are at the same level. Colby Covington was a Division I All-American wrestler. Kamaru Usman was a Division II, I believe, or Division III. There's a difference, in that. Now, has Kamaru for MMA wrestling, improved? I mean, we'll see. But if I'm Colby Covington, I go into that cage saying, look, I'm a Division I All-American. He's a Division II or Division III guy. I can out-wrestle him when I want to. I don't think Kamaru comes into the cage with that kind of confidence in his wrestling. He might think it's more of a stalemate or they're more even. I think Colby thinks he's a better wrestler, than Kamaru Usman, and I think he'll test that out. In addition to the volume punching and all those things, I think you'll see, especially in the 3rd and later rounds, I think you'll see him mix it up. And I think that'll be the difference, at least in game plan, in this fight.
The wrestling matchup in itself is fascinating. And James, you're right. Like the credentials, they are better for Colby than they are for Kamaru Usman at the amateur level. Now, when it comes to wrestling for MMA, They do it in a different way. Colby Covington has a better takedown success rate in the octagon. He's at 50%, which is very good this day and age. I mean, maybe, 20 years ago, Matt Hughes might have been like 90% effective, but with the way the sport has evolved, 50% is an excellent clip. And Colby, he's a better submission fighter. He's got more submissions to his record. So when he takes you down, he's going to look for a choke, right? Kamaru Usman tends to use his takedowns more for control and more to set up punches and set up ground and pound to maul you with his takedowns. So from an offensive wrestling standpoint, the stats do back up the idea that Colby Covington has a wrestling advantage in wrestling for MMA. But what makes this incredibly interesting, and I have to wonder if Colby is going to go to his wrestling, and if he does, what kind of success is he going to have? To this point in Kamaru Usman's very decorated UFC career, you want to know how many takedowns Kamaru Usman has given up in a fight? 0. Wow. The guy's never been taken down before. And it, maybe you could go through and say, well, it's because of this, that, and the other stylistic matchup he's had. I mean, he's fought wrestlers before, Kamaru Usman has. So to this point, he has not been successfully taken down in the octagon. And that really made me wonder, the last time that these guys fought one another, if that might have just been something that Colby realized that, hey, as good as I am of a wrestler, if I try to take this guy down, I'm just wasting my energy trying to do that. And he saw himself having some success in the striking and said, maybe I'm just going to work with this. But then, as you guys have brought up, I think, Frank, you brought it up first, that, Colby might be thinking, the game plan that I had last time around, I came close, but I didn't get it done. Maybe I do need to tweak that and try to surprise him with some wrestling this time around. I wouldn't mind seeing it. I don't think anybody necessarily is going into this fight thinking, oh, I hope that, these guys are just wrestling for 5 rounds. I mean, you want to see some hands being thrown. You want to see Usman's power. But I would find it incredibly intriguing if at some point in this fight, especially early in this fight, if someone does try and succeed to take it to the ground, because then you'd feel like this is not just an extension of their first fight. We're actually seeing something tactically much different from that. But I mean, in my humble opinion, and if anybody disagrees with this, and Frank, I'll let you give a rebuttal or a response to this first. I really, for as close as their fight was the first time around, and Usman did win by knockout and he broke his jaw, but anybody who didn't actually watch the fight might think, well, it wasn't close because one guy knocked out the other. No, it was incredibly close right up until the point that Kamaru Usman finished the fight. As close as that first encounter was, you see the pattern of Usman getting better in rematches than the originals. He's been a lot more active than Colby has. Colby has only fought once, and it was against a washed Tyron Woodley since these guys fought the first time around. And his hands have gotten better. He's gotten more powerful. I think Kamaru Usman's power is going to be the difference here. I see Kamaru Usman winning this fight, and I see him winning it earlier and more convincingly than he won the first fight. It was a 5th round stoppage last time around. I think it's going to be a 2nd or 3rd round stoppage this time around. It'd be very interesting to see Colby win because, a lot of people would be very triggered by the idea of having Colby Covington as a UFC champion, and the rants we're going to have to hear that guy go on. A lot of people would be very upset by that. I'm sure a lot of people are rooting for Kamaru Usman to win this fight just because of who Colby Covington is and Colby Covington's personality. It'd be interesting if Colby won this fight. I just don't see it. I think that this is going to be one-sided compared to the first one. Do you disagree, Frank?
I do. I disagree vehemently, actually. I think I think it'll go to decision. I don't know who's going to get it. I know Colby's plus 250, plus 260. So I know the odds makers don't think it's going to be close, but I do think it'll be close. Look, Colby's biggest advantage, in my opinion, is also his biggest disadvantage, in that he's a slighter frame guy than Kamaru Usman. So from an advantage standpoint, if he pushes the pace, if he uses that Division I wrestling that James mentioned, and he tries to make Kamaru Usman work in different ways in this fight, he can be very successful. The disadvantage is if he's looking for that big shot that Burns almost got Usman with, et cetera, if he's going to stand in the pocket and look for that shot, his frame is too slight. The first fight demonstrated it. The first fight almost made Colby look like he did not have as good a cardio. What was actually happening was his slighter frame just couldn't withstand all of that punishment. And I might mention also that as good as Usman's boxing has gotten, Who's the person who's had the most significant strikes against Kamaru Usman? It's Colby.
Colby.
And it's 3 times the next closest guy. I mean, so like both guys from a striking standpoint are really I both use a methodology that is specifically tuned for them, and I have to credit both coaches, but now they're coming out of different camps. And I'm going to be really fascinated to see what the continuation of that is and how that manifests itself in the fight.
Yeah, I'm actually with Frank, believe it or not.
I like a little dissension.
I see a lot of value in that plus 260. And really, if you think about what I've been saying about this fight since it was announced, I just have a feeling Colby's going to pull an upset on this one. I mean, both of these guys are razor close. I mean, if they fight 10 times, I think it'll probably be 6-4 one way or the other. Either, Kamaru wins 6 times or Colby might win 6 times or something like that. It's so close either way. But I think if Colby mixes it up, he'll still around with the wrestling. If he can hold Kamaru down for a minute and a half or something in one of those late rounds, he could still around, and that really could be the difference in the fight. I don't see a finish coming, even though they're both going to be going hard for 5 rounds like the first fight. But I think this is, both guys have unbelievable cardio. Both guys have great chins. Colby's well rested. A lot of people think it's rust because he only fought 1 time in 18 months. I think there's no wear and tear. That's kind of how I see it when it comes to Colby anyway, because he's that type of fighter that he's always going to stay in shape. He's always going to stay prepared. So he never got out of shape, and he doesn't have the wear and tear of fighting 3 or 4 fights in the last year and a half. So I like Colby in the upset by decision. I think he's going to mix it up with the wrestling and maybe steal a round late to where he'll probably win like 3-2. But I think it's going to be a razor thin fight either way.
By the way, huge shout out to some folks we're seeing turning up here in the live chat. Alex Alberto G, good evening to you. Brett, the movie guy, Kaz or Cass. I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. I try to cover all the bases, whether you are Cass or Kaz. Welcome into the chat. And Brett, the movie guy, kind of expanded on something I was saying. Colby winning is the better thing for the division. Honestly, Usman is already thinking of retirement. And then on to Canelo as well. Canelo don't need the division held up. Definitely listen, on the one hand, like for those who are really into, legacies, you can look at Kamaru and say, wow, he's like so close to reaching and then maybe someday eclipsing George St. Pierre in the welterweight division. So if like you're a fan of just watching a guy create history and become potentially the greatest of all time, Kamaru Usman is on that track right now. But if you're a fan of chaos and if you're just a fan of, hey, this guy has already beaten pretty much everybody. You're going to have some new challengers arising, like Hamza Chimayev. I think it's going to be in that conversation soon because he looks like an absolute monster in the welterweight division. But as far as the relevant players right now in 170, Usman has basically beaten everybody already, and he's going for round 2 with all these guys like the Colby Covingtons and the Jorge Masvidals of the world. So it would be a lot more interesting if he were to pull off this upset. And something, guys, I will give Colby credit for this. And this shows you that mixed martial arts 2020, 2021, you're starting to see a few of like the good things, I think, about boxing being adopted by MMA, where you're starting to see fighters, because like in MMA history, you've always got these mega camps, right? You've got American Top Team where there's like 500 professional fighters that are members, AKA Greg Jackson's, which is a little smaller, but it's still a mega team. But now you're starting to see this trend, and Colby Covington has become part of it, where it's a really good thing because these fighters in mixed martial arts, the good ones, they're getting more well off financially. They've got more endorsements than ever before. Their fight purses have gotten bigger. And they're starting to do personalized training because, a good thing about being at a gym like American Top Team is there are like literally dozens of killers you can spar with on any given day, but the coaches aren't necessarily giving you their undivided attention, right? Where Colby Covington, who left ATT not too long ago, has actually created a training regimen and coaching that is 100% tailored to him. It's something we've seen in boxing for a very long time, haven't seen enough of it in mixed martial arts. And of course, not every professional mixed martial arts fighter can afford to do that. It's only the people who are on the upper echelon. But yeah, and Frank, I know you and Colby used to be very tight before he went completely Hollywood. This is certainly something he can benefit from, right? Because for as great as the coaches are at ATT, they've got so many fighters to work with and to deal with. I would imagine that Colby is right now getting the best training of his life.
Yeah, I think the issue with American Top Team for the guys at the top of the food chain is not only that there's so much for a small number of coaches to deal with, but you also have, because of the size of American Top Team and its popularity, you might have like top contenders in the same division, which further fractures the ability of a gym to serve as individual fighters. And then you've seen some fighters have to, go off and train somewhere else for a while. Tyron Woodley was always heading off to Milwaukee, right? Or he would always head off,
to Duke Roufus.
He'd have to take off. So anyway, I just think it presents a lot of challenges. But you're right. I mean, for the top level guys, and by the way, I think Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington, I think it's them two. And then there's a drop off. And I know we're going to talk about Chimayev and maybe some other potential contenders coming up. But really, they're at the very top of the food chain. It's going to be really interesting to see if it's like a situation like, Barkley could have had a title if not for Jordan, right? Like if it's going to be one of those situations. But I think we're going to see Colby get it. And then I think we're going to see the third round of it. I think,
In terms of personalized training, if you can afford it, why not? I think it's the best route to go. You have, 100% attention. Everybody's, sort of training is geared toward Conor McGregor's another guy who's been doing that for a long time. Obviously, he can afford it. He can fly in guys, and to specifically train with him for a certain fight, especially for a title fight. It's kind of an investment, right? You want to be champ. You want to make the big money. Put the money down, have a specialized training camp, and go for the title. I think that's really smart. I think actually more fighters that are fighting for titles. I wouldn't do it if you're just a guy trying to crack the top 10 or whatever, and you're making $40,000 a fight. But if you're going for a title, I'd say it's kind of an investment in the fight, investment in your career to have that kind of personalized attention.
There are other excellent fights at UFC 268. Before we get to those, I want to get into a new edition of the Toss-Up. And, last week, Frank's email was broken or something. He didn't have the list in front of him. So, thankfully, the very capable James Walker pinch hit for Frank. But I think, Frank, you were prepared to retake the Toss-Up throne.
Yeah, I don't know what happened last week, guys. I mean, I had a Jan Blachowicz moment. But anyway, Dana White wants to make Nate Diaz versus Hamza Chimayev. Is that a terrible idea?
It's the worst idea ever. Like there's only one positive that would come out of that fight being made. Like the only positive that would come out of Chimaev fighting Nate Diaz is it would be probably the most eyes that have ever been on a Hamza Chimaev fight. So it'd be good for him, right? And I think he realizes that I'm beating fighters that people don't care about a whole lot. If I go in there and give Nate Diaz a free ass whooping, because that's what it's going to be. I'm a Diaz brothers fanboy. That's the worst stylistic matchup in the freaking world for Nate Diaz. Like I love him, but I would give him a 0.0% chance of beating Hamza Chimaev. He is going to be throwing him around like a ragdoll, the way that he did to Zhang Lang this past weekend. Like it's not even going to be a contest, right? So it's just stupid, lazy matchmaking. And I feel like if Dana White goes through with this, there's a clear agenda here. Like there is a clear agenda to try, and let me put my tinfoil hat on. Hold on.
God. Oh, here we go.
There is a clear and present agenda that Dana White knows Nate Diaz is entering the final fight of his contract. And of course he would want a big time extension. So Dana White just wants to motherfuck this guy in the final fight of his contract. Like he wants to sabotage him. He not only wants Diaz to lose, he wants him to lose in the most humiliating way possible against a guy he cannot beat. He cannot beat Hamza Chimaev. It is the worst stylistic match of all time. So Dana White is trying to devalue, humble, and humiliate Nate Diaz on the final fight of his contract. The only person who would benefit from this fight is Chimaev because he gets a little rub from fighting Nate Diaz. Promotionally, it's pointless because everyone knows what's going to happen in that fight. Like if you want to keep promoting Nate Diaz fights, send him in there against bangers. Like send him in there against people who are going to throw punches with him. That's the only thing you should be doing right now. This is a really, really stupid fight and a clear agenda by Daddy Dana to try and make Nate Diaz look bad. What say you, James?
Whew. I actually agree with you overall, but for a different reason. I think fighting Nate Diaz would take Chimaev further away from the title than it actually brings him closer. Why wouldn't he be in there against a Gilbert Burns or Vicente Luque or a guy in the top 5 that would pretty much put him one fight away from a title shot. Beating Nate wouldn't put him any closer, even though he would get the rub in the name. He's not going to get a title shot in the next fight. He's probably have to fight 2 more times to get a title shot and end up fighting a Gilbert Burns or Vicente Luque anyway to get in that conversation. So why even waste 6 months of Chimaev's career with a training camp and a fight and then another training camp till he actually faces a guy? Put him in there against a top 5 guy right now. He's ready, obviously. He beat the number 11 guy. Put him in there against, whoever is available, if Burns is available or Vicente Luque or whoever, in that top 5 is available. And then, that puts him right in the conversation with Leon Edwards and whoever else would be next, for a title shot.
What's wrong with you guys? Come on. And Nate or Alex, I called you Nate. Alex,
might as well.
Hat back on. Yeah. Hey, listen, guys, this is what's going on. The UFC's been at this for a while. They kind of know what they're doing. And no, Alex, I don't think they want to ruin Nate Diaz and sabotage contract negotiations. The guy could get thrown out of the octagon and like a spear into the 400 seats, and he would still sell out a pay-per-view. Doesn't matter. No, what they're doing is they realize that Chimaev is probably a future champion. And they're like, holy cow, we've got this really tremendous athletic asset, and nobody knows who he is. So he fights Nate Diaz. Suddenly they know who he is. That's what they're benefiting from. They want to put this guy on the map before they could not put, James, to your point, they could not put Chimaev, Gilbert Burns. It couldn't headline anything. I mean, nobody, none of the fans even know how to say his name. So, but he fights Nate Diaz. He picks Nate Diaz up like a dart and throws him out of the octagon. Suddenly, you know who Chimaev is. So it's great. I think it's a smart move, but I don't think Nate Diaz is going to take this, is he? Because
I hope not.
Nate Diaz. I mean, he's smart enough to realize he's being used to market a future potential champion.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure what Dana White is probably telling him is like, this is the last fight in your contract, take it or leave it. Like, otherwise you're just going to sit out is there like, obviously there's a number of fights you have on the contract. Is there ever a point where you sit out long enough, the contract is void, or 20 years from now, will Nate Diaz still owe Dana White one more fight? I'm not quite sure how that works, because I think it varies from organization to organization, but Dana White might just say, hey, if we have you under contract, this is the fight, take it or leave it. And listen, Nate Diaz is the type that would probably say, all right, I'm leaving it. I'm not taking it. If he doesn't want to fight it, he won't want to fight. I mean, his older brother sat out for like 6 years before taking another fight. I don't think Nate would mind sitting out for a little while.
Isn't this also why we have Masvidal's next fight booked? I mean, George doesn't realize this, but he's kind of being used this way too. He's a big name right now, and you're setting this guy up, for a really important fight, and you want him to sell it better. People will tune in to watch, the Miami Badass fight him. So, I mean, I think this is a smart game by the UFC to try to elevate some name brands.
I think it's interesting, too, that Dana White has publicly said, hey, we're going to approach Nate about this fight, like with the bullhorn. Look, everybody, we're going to approach Nate about this fight so everybody knows if it doesn't happen, Nate turned it down. They usually don't kind of give us a peek behind the curtain that often, that clearly, but Dana's clearly making this in Nate's last fight, letting everybody know that he's offering him Chimaev. So if it doesn't happen, you know who to point to of why it didn't happen. I thought that was interesting.
All right, guys. Glover Teixeira is the new light heavyweight champion. Will he successfully defend his title?
No. Now, he impressed the hell out of me. Although I kind of wonder if Jan Blachowicz even trained. Right? Blachowicz looked awful. I mean, he landed like an uppercut, and that's it. He got taken down at will by a 41-year-old. Actually, he had just turned 42. A 42-year-old man took him down multiple times, finished him, mauled him with a left hook. I mean, as happy as I am for Glover Teixeira, because that dude, he has had a journey. Like I remember he didn't debut in the UFC. He was well known, like around fighting in Brazil, fighting for other organizations. He was well known, relatively speaking, but he didn't debut in the UFC till he was 32 years old. And when he made his UFC debut a decade ago, conversations were being had then about, man, I wonder if Glover Teixeira like has enough time to make a title run in the UFC because he's so old making his debut. He already had one title bid. He had the misfortune of having to fight John Jones. We know how that goes for everybody. So he had a failed title bid. And then at his age, late 30s at the time, into his early 40s, I never thought Glover Teixeira would have enough time left. I mean, maybe if he was a heavyweight, sure, light heavyweight, not so much. He would have enough time to forge a second title run. So unbelievable story, dominant performance by Glover Teixeira. But guys, it's looking like his next opponent is going to be Yuri Prochazka. That guy is a murderer. That guy is an absolute murderer. The argument you could make in Glover's favor is he's just so much more experienced and he's fought, better fighters and he's seen everything where Prochazka has not. But Prochazka, I think he's going to take Teixeira apart. Assuming that is going to be his first title defense, because he's open to it. He's talked about it. Prochazka was actually at the event in Abu Dhabi, and he stood up in his seat and took a bow and all that. So, assuming that's his first title defense, enjoy Glover Teixeira as champion while you can, because it's not going to last very long.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup for Glover. I agree with that, but really, I mean, to Frank's point that he's been making for months, who really cares about the light heavyweight division at this point? I think there's really only two things that could save Glover's title run from people caring about it. One, if John Jones just suddenly has a change of heart and decides to say, "Yeah, you know what? I want to go back down. I'm this heavyweight thing hasn't been working out. I'm getting in trouble. I want to fight. I know I can beat Glover already. Let me go get my belt back." Or if Israel Adesanya, a fight or two from now decides, "Hey, I want to give it another crack. Maybe I could beat Glover. I know I had some struggles against Jan Blachowicz. I think I can beat Glover. Let me move back up and try to be a 2-division champion." I think that's really the only two scenarios where people will care about this division right now, because it's pretty stale right now. So even your boy, Alex, if he wins the belt, I don't think there'll be a lot of buzz about, who's the champ in this division.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I sat back on my couch after Teixeira did what everyone thought was impossible, and I thought, wow, and I didn't think this division could get any worse. Now we've got a middle-aged guy from Danbury, Connecticut, who's got the belt. Who cares? No, he probably won't be able to hold on to it, but maybe he would get one defense successfully, but I don't think he'll be able to hold on to it. I think it'll be a revolving door of people that we don't care about. I'm hoping that there's an infusion, as James intimated, with Adesanya. I don't know if it's him necessarily, but maybe some other, 185er that's looking to kind of, get around the impossible in Adesanya and inject some marketable life into this division. Otherwise, I think Dana's got to go calling on these guys he sent over to Bellator, because it's a mess, man. I mean, it's Scott Coker's world now at 205, right? He owned the heavyweight division for a while, and then, now it's 205 that he's taken hold of. So I don't know, man. I don't see John Jones coming back in any division unless he gets a truckload of cash, which it doesn't seem like he's likely to get anytime soon. Oh, I'm sorry. I paused like somebody else is going to read the question. All right. Last weekend, Bruce Buffer missed his first UFC pay-per-view in 25 years after testing positive for COVID-19. Where does Bruce Buffer rank among best MMA or boxing ring announcers?
Yeah, I'm a big nerd for this stuff. As someone, I've done a little bit of ring announcing before. I'm a huge geek for it. Bruce Buffer is not number one for me. And I admit this is a lot of nostalgia.
Oh, I know where you're going.
The crazy screaming woman with pride, Lenny Hart. Oh, and I've had it. She's such a lovely woman. I had a chance to interview her before. It's been many years. I'll see if I can try to track her down, but she lives in Tokyo. She's an American woman who's lived in Tokyo for like 20 years. So she could be difficult to coordinate with, but if I can get her on the show, I'd love to. The way she would scream out the names, like, oh my God. It's so many freaking memories. Pride. She also did the ring announcing for Dream. She does Asian promotions. Just unbelievable. It's a nostalgia pick for me because those were like my glory days as an MMA fan. So Lenny Hart is number one, the crazy screaming lady from Pride. My number two, a Buffer, but not Bruce. Michael Buffer is just so iconic. Is Michael Buffer a little bit washed? Yeah. Which one was the fight? Was it the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight when he had no voice whatsoever? And you're like, bro, green tea or something, man, lozenges. Michael Buffer is probably not what he was like in the 80s and 90s. But, Michael Buffer, just so iconic, great businessman. I mean, he's got his that phrase he says, I'm not even sure if I can say it on the show. We might get sued. Let's get something to something. His phrase, let's get ready to, and I'll stop myself right there. Yeah, like he's got that trademarked. He makes probably 7 figures every year just suing people for using that phrase when they're not allowed to. It's amazing. Michael Buffer is my number 2. I might go Bruce Buffer at number 3. I'm not a huge Jimmy Lennon Jr. guy. He's
God,
just a little, just a little boring, a little monotone. I do like the backup in the UFC, Joe Martinez. He's good. He's good. Just he's a little bit like typical, like a little typical cookie cutter. So I probably do go Bruce Buffer 3. So I've got Bruce Buffer behind only Lenny Hart, the crazy screaming woman, and his half brother Michael Buffer. I've got it number 2, Bruce number 3. What do you think, James?
Man, I don't have a Rolodex of announcers like you guys, man.
I don't either.
I watch the fights, man. Michael Buffer would probably be number 1, and to me, Bruce is number 2. I couldn't name. I mean, I know the crazy Pride lady. I know of her. I wouldn't know her name, but she's great.
She's awesome.
I couldn't name you more than 2 announcers. So those are my 1 and 2.
So fun fact, right? Bruce Buffer didn't know that he was the half brother of Michael Buffer until I think 1990, maybe 89, 90.
Wow.
When they discovered each other. They now co-own a company together that basically sues people for saying, let's get ready to do something.
That's right.
And it's time. So anyway, I look, they're 1-1 for me. They're 2 different sports. So, like for Bruce, he represents that announcing for MMA for me. There is no parallel for him. And then Michael Buffer for me in boxing that's the voice I want to hear when I'm watching a boxing match. So for me, they're tied. And I think Michael does a little wrestling too. Although I don't watch that, but Alex, you might be able to validate that.
I think James is the wrestling guy.
Oh, okay. Didn't Michael Buffer used to do some wrestling stuff?
Not for maybe some WCW stuff way back.
That was what it was. Yeah, in the 90s. He would. Yeah,
we're going way back. Yeah. All right.
Hold on. I got another quick. I got another quick Bruce Buffer thought before we move on. I don't know, around a decade ago, I went on this kick where I was reading the biographies, like the autobiographies of MMA fighters and personalities. I read BJ Penn's book, which was fantastic. Why I Fight. Yeah. I read Chael Sonnen's book, which was really entertaining. His wit and his humor was intertwined throughout the book. And then I think I was sent a copy. I didn't buy it, but I started to read Bruce Buffer's autobiography. It's called Popping Bottles and Kissing Models. I couldn't get through 4 pages of it. Dude, it was the maniacal ramblings of a narcisist. Did you ever read that, Frank?
I tried. I only got to page 3. It was
terrible.
So bad. You know when I knew he was an unimaginable narcissist? When you and I interviewed him, and he had invented an app for your phone where he would just say, hey, good morning, it's time. There's 100 different versions of it's time.
And you know why we discovered that was because I very polite and sometimes people say no to this request and it's fine. But I had kindly asked Bruce Buffer. This was for we were pre-recording an AM radio interview, and I kindly asked Bruce Buffer, hey, if you don't mind, it'd be kind of cool. Maybe you could do a personalized drop where you say it's time for fight night with Alex Donno and Frank Zaffere. I asked him that. And then his response was, I won't do that for you. But if you download my app, you can pay for a recording of me doing it. It's
unbelievable. We did ask him in the interview, and I thought he was somewhat candid about this. You guys, you ever have just your brain shuts down? So, a brain fart for a minute, and you can't remember the most obvious thing. It's happening to me more and more. Might be my age. But I watch him in the octagon, and he's at 12 decibels high, and he's jumping around like a lunatic, and he looks over to his opponent and he starts saying his name, and his opponent's staring back at him. And I just wonder if ever in that moment it's oh shit, what's this guy's name? Or what weight class is he? But I guess he's holding that card so he can kind of glance at that while he's doing it. But man, is he good. I mean, because he's right. What's great about him is he's involved with the fighter as he's giving the fighter the introduction. I think it's pretty badass.
Yeah, a lot of them give him a pound and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they really appreciate it. They really appreciate the intros.
Yeah. All right, one more silly question. They're everywhere this time of year. Do you like pumpkin flavored anything? Food, beverage, anything?
It's literally the worst thing in the world. I hate autumn. Thanksgiving time is terrible. This even like bleeds sometimes into Christmas with this pumpkin spice nonsense. I do not understand the fascination people have for the flavor of pumpkin. Like, do you want to ruin a coffee? Do you want to ruin a pie? Do you want to ruin a cookie? Let's put some pumpkin flavor. And they always add like cinnamon. I hate cinnamon. Oh, this is the worst time of year. I think like the only pumpkin flavored thing that I kind of like, and I think it's because it's like so packed with like butter and terrible, terrible things. At Panera Bread, they do like pumpkin muffins. Those are fire. Like for whatever reason, I can tolerate pumpkin and actually enjoy it when it's in like a Panera Bread pumpkin muffin. But pumpkin cookies, pumpkin bread, pumpkin spice latte, pumpkin pie, I don't like any of it. Like I do not like the fact that this time of year everything gets pumpkin-fied. It's awful.
Pumpkin's okay with me. I like pumpkin pie. There's a few things pumpkin wise I don't like, but I don't feel strongly about it either way. I don't hate pumpkin. I don't particularly,
By the way, I hate actual pumpkins. Like there was nothing worse when you were a kid. Like when you were a kid and like grown-ups were like, oh, every kid loves to make a jack-o'-lantern. You have to reach your hand into that freaking disgusting core, and then your hand smells like pumpkin for like a month because it doesn't wash off. Oh, it's
my
awful.
God.
Yeah, it's all right. I don't feel strongly either way on my end, but I'm glad that you feel very strongly about disliking pumpkins, Alex.
I have the same relationship with the pumpkin as I do with the pig. Like, I like bacon, I like ribs, but I don't like ham very much, and I don't like pork chops. I'm kind of so pumpkin's the same thing for me. Pumpkin pie, I love pumpkin donuts. I really like, but
Never had one of those. Okay.
If you gave me like a pumpkin ice cream, I wouldn't want to eat that. There's some pumpkin seeds are great though. You didn't like that as a kid, Alex?
No,
pumpkin
awful.
seeds. No,
sunflower seeds. Yeah. Nuts. Yeah, no, not pumpkin seeds. No.
Well, on that great question, that wraps up our toss-up.
I put that in there. It's like the most self-serving thing. I wanted an excuse to rant about pumpkin stuff. So I'm like, oh, let me put it in the toss-up for today. So
you succeeded, yeah.
Oh, I apologize for my mania. All right, so let's look a little bit deeper into UFC 268. We talked about the main event, and for anybody who's just tuning in, you can go back and watch the replay. Oh, and I should mention, by the way, listen to the replay because finally there was some technical holdup, technology that I do not understand why it took us a long time to get on Apple Podcasts for our show replays, because we've been on, since July, we've been available on Spotify, but a lot of people, myself included, the first place that I go to listen to podcasts is Apple Podcasts. And I want to let everybody know, if you go into the podcast app on your iPhone or your tablet, because it works the same, even if you have like a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone, just go into the podcast store, search for 5 rounds, and you're going to see the orange fist logo that we have, the pumpkin colored logo, the orange fist that we have, and make sure you subscribe to our podcast, because I understand, I love the video format and I'm glad we're doing this, but I do understand that in certain situations, if you're like a commuter, it's probably easier for some people to listen to the audio, and everybody, the technology is great now. The Bluetooth, you play it right through your car speakers. So that's another great way to access the show. Go to the Apple Podcast Store. You can also go to Spotify, where we've been for months, but go there, search for 5 rounds, and you will see the orange and black fist logo pop up there. And that's another way to consume our content. So moving along, guys, co-main event, another championship fight here. Women's strawweight champion Rose Namajunas, Thug Rose, is going to defend her belt against Weili Zhang. They have fought before. Rose won this fight by knockout. Now, guys, this is one where I do see the belt changing hands here. And I know that Thug Rose won the first encounter, but a minute 18 head kick knockout, Zhang didn't really have a chance to get going in that fight. I just think she is the better, more well-rounded fighter. And if she doesn't get caught early the way that Rose caught her the last time around, I think you're going to see a different fight and a different outcome. So even though I I'm the only person on this panel who does not see the men's welterweight title changing hands. I do see the women's strawweight belt changing hands. I think that Weili Zhang, probably by decision, is going to get her hand raised, and she's going to take the belt from Thug Rose. Frank, I'll let you jump in next.
It's hard to argue that there isn't a strong possibility for that. I mean, they're very, very evenly matched. Rose caught her in the last fight. But I don't know. There's something about me that just really pulls for Rose. I mean, she's just an incredibly likable person, incredibly resilient and tough, and just such a great representative of the brand. And I'm pulling for her. So maybe it's more emotional than, clinical in terms of how I feel about it. But I think Rose doesn't knock her out this time, but I think Rose wins by a comfortable decision. I think she gets probably 4 of the 5 rounds. And by the way, could she please change her nickname from Thug, because she doesn't look like a thug, to
she's got that shaved head though, like the short. Like I kind of see it actually. Like back in the day when she had long hair, I couldn't see it.
I want Rose Precog Namajunas, and then I want her to go into shtick where she predicts what she's going to do to her opponents. Kind of Conor McGregor. Hey, I saw a vision. I knocked your ass out again.
She does look like that Minority Report. That was that movie, right?
Yeah.
She looks like the precog.
Yeah.
Oh.
Looks like she's laying in that pool with the other 2. Yeah.
Oh my God. You crack me up every time.
Zhang reminds me of the Petr Yan of women's MMA. She's a machine, and she got caught, but she's a pressure fighter that comes forward and hits harder than pretty much anyone in her division. Kind of like Petr Yan, hits harder and is a machine and comes forward more than anyone in his division. For 5 rounds, I just see there being too much pressure. I don't see her getting caught again, and I just don't think we saw enough in that first minute and a half or whatever it was in that first fight to kind of see how tough of a matchup this is for Rose Namajunas. I just think James, it's a little bit too tough a matchup for her, especially if it goes beyond a couple rounds. I just think her power and her pressure will just be too much. So I do see the title going back, and there's a revenge factor which always plays into it when a person loses, especially in the manner in which she lost in the first fight.
And the next fight I want to break down, and James, I want to get your insight on this first before we start talking about it. Now, up until recently, this was right in the middle of the main card. It was going to happen right before the co-main event, which we just talked about, the women's strawweight fight, and before the main event between Usman and Covington. But the fight between Justin Gaichi and Michael Chandler, which is going to be a barn burner, that was actually moved to the first fight of the main card. I didn't know the backstory to it, James, until you told it to me before the show.
Yeah, so I found out just reading last night that Trevor Whitman has gone to the UFC, the trainer for 3 of these fighters on this main card here, and went to the UFC and said, hey, look, I have back-to-back-to-back. I have Gaichi, I have Rose Namajunas, and Kamaru Usman, 2 champs in the last 2 fights that I have to corner in back-to-back-to-back fights. That's a lot. That's a lot to give attention to the fighter that's waiting while being in the octagon for the fighter that's in there and et cetera. And so the UFC granted his wish and made Justin Gaichi, Michael Chandler the first fight of the pay-per-view, so he can corner that, and then he'll have 2 fights in between to get Rose prepared. And then, you got 2 title fights. You can't avoid those 2 going co-main and main events. So they granted him his wish. I think it was a good move by the UFC. Trevor Whitman's been doing a good job. He's not the type of person who's going to rock the boat or cause any controversy or dissension or anything. So his ask was a reasonable request, and the UFC thought so, obviously. And so it's a great way to kick off the pay-per-view. So I think there's, that's kind of the people's main event. That's the fight that everybody's been looking forward to anyway. So why not make it first?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that like card placement within a main card is that important, because the people watching it have presumably already paid for it, right? Yep. So it's I can understand why for like the free TV shows, like if you have a card on ESPN or ESPN2, why you're very deliberate on where you place the fights, because you want to maximize viewership in every quarter hour. But in a pay-per-view, it's you either buy it or you don't, right? So it's not a big difference. In fact, I kind of like it as a fight fan, even if I've already paid the $70, so I'm going to watch the whole thing no matter what. It kind of gets you in the mood. Like when you get an excellent fight, and you don't have to put this one last, of course, because there's no title on the line. You get an excellent fight like this. why not let it be the curtain jerker? Like, why not it get you energized? It's going to get the crowd energized in the arena at Madison Square Garden, the mecca for sports. So it's going to get people going. And this fight, I'll give Frank the first word on the matchup, and then James, and I'll save the worst for last, and I'll give you my analysis at the end. But this fight, Justin Gaichi, a -210 favorite against Michael Chandler, former Bellator champ. Recently had a failed bid at the vacant lightweight title. Lost to Charles Oliveira. Michael Chandler, the slight underdog at +165. Gaichi, the favorite, at -210. Frank, who you got here, and are you expecting the fireworks that everyone thinks we get with this one?
100% I'm expecting the fireworks. A lot similar to the Colby, Covington, Kamaru, Usman cancellation of wrestling. Chandler is hyper aggressive. Justin Gaichi is unparalleled in his aggressiveness. Chandler and Gaethje's wrestling will negate it out, and it will be, whether Chandler wants it to be or not, a stand in the pocket and just exchange power shots. Gaethje's more durable. Gaichi knocks him out. I mean, it's going to happen quickly. I mean, if it makes it to the second round, I'll be stunned. But yeah, that's how I think this fight goes.
Yeah, Gaichi, the durability thing is, I think, the key, because both of them fight in firefights. It's just Gaichi has a stronger chin. At this point, he can take more punishment, and he probably can dish out a little more punishment than Michael Chandler. Both of them can dish it, but I think Gaethje's a little stronger. You got to consider the leg kicks as well. Gaethje's leg kicks are unparalleled, second to none in his division. That was really almost the key to giving Khabib some trouble. He was getting to Khabib's legs, in that first round or so. Before Khabib took that shot and then got him on the ground and submitted him. So yeah, it's a super exciting fight. I hope as a fan it goes more than a round or two. I hope it goes into the third round. I see a finish coming. I like Justin Gaichi in the fight. And just one more note on Trevor Whitman. I don't know if there was any gamesmanship involved in this at all, but as a trainer, you would assume that he went to Justin Gaichi about this first and said, hey, maybe a couple weeks ago, and said, hey, here's my challenge. I have 3 fighters back to back to back. What do you think about moving up and fighting maybe an hour and a half earlier without going to Michael Chandler, obviously, because he doesn't owe Michael Chandler to go to him with that. So I'm sure he went to Gaichi first. Gaichi probably said, okay, I'll prepare for that. I'll be ready an hour and a half earlier, warmed up. And Chandler probably didn't find out until, 2-3 days before the fight. Oh, no, now I got to get ready 90 minutes earlier to get into this firefight. So it might have been a little bit of gamesmanship there, but I think Justin Gaichi wins either way.
Yeah, I like that because you never know what sort of rituals fighters are going to have, because I think timing is important, right? And you're mentally ready. You plan out your day like, oh, I'm probably going to hit the octagon around 11:30 p.m. Oh, now I'm going to hit the octagon right at 10 p.m. I think it makes sense.
But wouldn't you agree, Alex and James? I mean, wouldn't you agree when you're facing something very stressful, you're very anxious about it? What could be more anxiety riddled than going into an octagon under such stakes, in a fight like that? You just want to get it on. You know what I mean? I don't want to. Yeah. The last thing I would want to do is sit around all night and wait for it. So I'm actually, I would be happy about it. I think most people would probably feel that way. Yeah, let's just get it going. Let's just do it.
And for how I think the fight is going to go, I don't know if I'm going to bet this fight, at least not a straight winner, because I favor Gaichi, but at -220. I don't know, because obviously when you've got a couple of heavy-handed individuals like this who are going to be swinging for the fences, there is a little bit of a risk to lay down, 220 to win 100 back. There is some risk there. I do favor Justin Gaichi in this fight, and it comes down to what you guys have been saying, just the durability. I mean, he seems impossible to knock out, right? Whereas Michael Chandler, who, maybe a little bit more controlled and technical, but his chin can be got. I mean, I'm looking at Michael Chandler's his most recent losses, and obviously these losses are spread out amongst a ton of wins. But if you look at Michael Chandler's most recent losses, his last fight, Charles Oliveira, lost by TKO. His previous loss, Patricio Pitbull in Bellator, he lost by TKO. Lost before that to Brent Primus, lost by TKO. To Will Brooks, his loss prior to that, he lost by TKO. So his 4 previous losses have all been by stoppage. His chin can be got at. Gaichi seems virtually invincible from a chin standpoint. I mean, maybe he can be submitted. I don't think Chandler is going to be the guy to do that on this occasion. So I'm going to take the guy who packs more power, which is the case in Justin Gaichi, and has the more durable chin. I think that's always the safe bet when you head into a fight. You know it's going to be a firefight, right? Give me the guy who's got the better chin and the heavier hands. That's probably the one who's going to win a firefight. So yeah, for those reasons, I am going to go with Justin Gaichi. And I want to go over a few more of the odds from these fights, and then we can talk a little bit about the other fights on the main card, including the ageless one himself, Frankie Edgar, who's fighting. But we've talked about the main event. I'm looking at betus.com. Colby Covington, the plus 250 underdog. And guys, even though I did confidently pick Kamaru Usman to win, same deal at minus 350 odds. Unless I'm down on the night and then I'm chasing at the end of it, I might say, let me put some big chips on Kamaru Usman to try to win some money back. I actually did that the night that he knocked out Gilbert Burns. I was having a really bad betting card, and I wasn't planning on betting on Usman because he was like minus 310 or 320. And I don't necessarily like to take those odds, but I was doing so poorly. I'm like, he's going to win. Let me put down big money. Let me chase my losses on Usman. And he nearly lost. Like Gilbert Burns caught him, and I was sweating bullets. I'm like, oh no, I would have been down so bad if Usman had lost that fight. But then Usman did come back and win the fight, and I made all my losses back on that. So unless I'm chasing, I'm not going to bet Usman at minus 350. And conversely, even though I am officially picking Usman to win the fight, there's some value there on Colby Covington. So if I am of the mind, I'm not, but if I were of the mind of Frank and James that Covington's going to get his hand raised here, you got to love those odds, guys, at plus 250. Like you got to, if you were to put down, whatever multiple you're using, but if you put down $100, you're winning 250 back if he gets his hand raised. That's a good return.
Yeah, definitely value in Colby with this. I don't think it's a 300 level fight. It's more like a 180, plus 140 or 120 kind of fight, minus 180 Usman or something. The odds are way too high. These people obviously didn't watch the first fight. Or yeah. I guess with Vegas betting lines, they're trying to make the lines based on getting money on both sides. But so they figure everybody's seen Kamaru Usman just run roughshod through the division the last 3 or 4 fights. So more money is going to be on his side. Let's raise the stakes higher. But really, I think from a smart money standpoint, from an MMA money standpoint, I think it is worth putting plus 250 on Colby. I think those are really good odds for him.
You're right, obviously, about the strategy that Vegas sets up these lines with, but there's also the reality that they're just not that in tune with this sport yet. And I think you still see lines that are inappropriate as a consequence of that. I think some of these guys are just doing it as an assignment when they're normally doing college football or something. So, he knocked out George Masvidal. His boxing's great. And Colby hasn't fought in a while, so he's going to annihilate him, and he beat him last time, and that's it. And I think the line reflects that. So I agree with you. I think this is one of those things when if you follow the sport, you really have the jump on the sharps out there. I mean, if you know the sport, this is a fight to make money on.
Yep. Yeah, no doubt. But I do see from an odds standpoint, as someone who favors Weili Zhang against Rose Namajunas, I'm definitely betting on the co-main event because the odds are razor close there. They're both just in the minus. Weili Zhang, it's basically a pick 'em fight, but Zhang at minus 120, Rose Namajunas at minus 110. Obviously, we know the outcome of the first fight. It was Thug Rose by knockout, so you have to respect that. We know she's capable of ending a fight in the blink of an eye. I just think, as James put it so well, Weili Zhang is a machine, and I'm not going to count on her getting caught in the second fight. I think Zhang is going to win this fight. I feel pretty good about it. So minus 120 on Weili Zhang, I feel great about it. Well, I have to decide if I want to do anything in the main event. Maybe I'll look for a prop. In the co-main event, I am backing up the Brinks truck on Weili Zhang.
I actually agree with that. I think that's a good, it's basically a pick 'em fight. And as far as Vegas is concerned, so man, I'm liking these odds. I'm not a bettor, but I mean, if I was a bettor, this is the kind of card I would get into. I think I could actually make some pretty good money by using your strategy, betting a lot on a co-main event, and then probably taking Colby plus points with a little less money involved, but still taking them plus 2.5 to 1.
Now, I don't know. I wouldn't want to go anywhere near this other title fight with it being a pick 'em in my mind, as well as what the odds reflect. I mean, I don't know who's going to win this fight. I just don't have any strong opinion, but you apparently do, Alex. So
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about Weili Zhang. Brett, the movie guy, wrote in, going back to the line for the main event. What the line doesn't know is Colby and Usman are coming into this fight with completely new camps and different game plans. The game plan part, it's yet to be seen. We were, and I think Brett was already in at that. I think he's been in for the entire show, so he saw the conversation. Like we were kind of debating that. And James brought up a good point in that since Usman won the first fight, there might be more of an emphasis for Colby to adjust. And if Usman is approaching it that way, for his sake, I hope he's not, because, the fight was close enough that I think he's got to be thinking to try to be one step ahead of Colby. If I were Usman, it's probably the wrong idea to approach this fight and say, I'm just going to do what got me here, and I'm going to do the same sort of stuff I did in the first fight, and I'll be fine. He's got to adjust to me. I don't know about that strategy, because if Colby Covington is making big adjustments, I think it's the job of Usman and Trevor Whitman, to be saying whatever adjustments we think he's going to make, we need to adjust for that. Like that's how you stay a champion in this sport, is to be a step or two ahead of the opposition.
Alex, if Kamaru Usman is successful against Colby with his power, and I think that's how he wants to be successful.
Yeah.
Don't you think we could forget about George St. Pierre right away? Because if you suddenly have a dominant welterweight champion who's finishing fights, remember George St. Pierre, he wasn't the finisher. He was the safe fighter. I mean, I think you have that. Kamaru Usman is on the precipice of making us forget George St. Pierre completely. I mean, certainly for the casual fan. It's electrifying what he can do with that power.
Let me ask you a couple of legacy questions, because I'm old enough to remember when BJ Penn was considered the lightweight GOAT, but I would say Khabib Nurmagomedov made most people forget about BJ, and he surpassed that legacy. So would you look at that way? I mean, to what Frank is just talking about, James, I'll go to you first on this one. Do you think Usman is maybe one or two dominant wins away from clearly surpassing GSP, or is GSP going to still be at least a debate for a while on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be debatable for a while, but the style in which he's winning, Frank, I think that's a very good point. But I just think there's something to nostalgia to where people aren't. I mean, there's some people that think GSP is the greatest of all time. People that might, say, hey, John Jones has a lot of controversy, picograms, whatever, element they want to throw in there to discredit John Jones. And a lot of people will put, George St. Pierre at number 2, maybe with or right behind Anderson Silva, maybe. But yeah, I want to see Kamaru Usman probably, if he wins in dominant fashion, maybe 2 or 3 more fights, then I think he might surpass. It's sad to say this, but I need to see him beat Chimaev. If he beats,
I like it.
If he continues his reign, and wins this fight against Colby, maybe has to fight a Leon Edwards or something after that, and then has the up and coming new machine that's coming through the division, and he puts a stop to that, then I think that really cements Kamaru Usman as the greatest welterweight ever. But as far as overall, you got to give GSP credit too. He went up in a weight class and beat what's his name? Bisbane. Yes, he beat Bisbane and won another title, another weight class. Kamaru Usman probably is not going to do that, especially with Izzy Adesanya's friend as the champion in the upper weight class. So you're probably not going to see that. So you got to give him credit for that overall. But in terms of welterweight, I want to see him win 2 or 3 more fights, and I need to see him fight Chimaev as that last statement fight if he's truly the greatest.
James, if you're right, okay, and he were to beat Colby, so you said 3 more, so beat Colby, beat Edwards, and then beat Chimaev.
Yep.
He now would have the longest winning streak to start a career in the UFC of any fighter that's ever competed. He would at that point be, I believe, at 17, Anderson Silva at 16, Khabib back at 13, and then he's the greatest in any division, in my opinion. Because I think a little too much emphasis is placed on title defenses, and I think the really sacred record in our sport is you start in the sport, you start in the UFC, how many wins do you rattle off? Because everyone you're facing is, among the best in the world. And he's right now in between Khabib and Anderson Silva.
By the way, I just want to give people an update. I think momentarily Dean Thomas is going to hop in assuming he's got good enough connection. He's actually in New York City at a barber shop. He told me this guy's jet setting. I mean, he's in Port St. Lucie or Palm Beach. He was over in Abu Dhabi. I actually, guys, I don't know if I told you on or off the show that last week, early afternoon before we went on at 6:00 last Thursday, I sent Dean a text to see if he could join us and preview UFC 267. Silly me, I didn't realize he's probably out in Abu Dhabi, and it was the middle of the night there. I think he forgot to turn his ringer off, so he wrote back. He's like, "No, I'm in bed in Abu Dhabi." Just he didn't write anything after that. I'm like, "Oh man, I felt so bad." So he's in New York City today. I think he'll be joining us momentarily. But James, you brought up Hamza Chimayev. Can we talk about him for a second? Because he comes back from a really long COVID-19 layoff during which he wasn't even sure if he was going to fight again. He thought about retirement. And he was a big favorite in this fight against Li Jianlang. But still, that was a tough opponent. And we thought this is going to be a good kind of litmus test, good measuring stick from him coming back from a long layoff. Not only did he win, it was an absolute steamrolling. Immediately he gets Jingliang's back and just drags him around like a rag doll, and then eventually chokes him out, and actually literally choked him out. Didn't get a tap. He was unconscious. He was asleep. You saw Li Jinglang was they brought in 3 officials and doctors. I'm like, oh my God, is he dead? He wasn't dead, thank goodness. But I mean, that was just a systematic destruction. And obviously it didn't really tell us anything about his cardio after the long layoff or his well-roundedness. It was completely one-sided grappling, just destruction, ragdolling, domination. But I've been watching Hamza Chimayev long enough to know that this guy has the makings of a future champion, right? I mean, it might only be a matter of when, not if, that guy's holding a belt.
Yeah, and kudos to the UFC for building him up the right way. They could have rushed him through. They could have taken the Johnny Walker approach or some of these other prospects that have come up and they give him top 5 fights too early and they lose and then they never really regain their confidence. They've pretty much put him up against, guys outside the top 10 the entire time and really build him up. And yeah, he's steamrolling through all those guys. But let's be honest, if Kamaru Usman was fighting the 14th ranked guy and the 15th and 16th and 11th ranked guy in the division, Kamaru Usman would be steamrolling those guys, as well. But no one really is talking about that. Everybody's talking about Chimaev's dominance over these guys as he should be. So he's doing what he's supposed to do as probably the biggest prospect in the UFC. He will be the next big star as long as he doesn't lose. And the fact that he can lift the guy up, talk to the people at ringside while he's lifting the guy up, just has that level of confidence and then throws him down and just, puts him to sleep. He's a scary guy. Kamaru, he definitely has Kamaru Usman's attention, even though he hasn't beaten anyone inside the top 10. That's why I think he needs to fight somebody. I mean, who cares about the name recognition of Nate Diaz? I just don't think that does anything for his ranking. I don't think that puts him anywhere closer to the top. He needs to fight a guy that's going to put him in the top 5 or top 4, and then right there he'll be a legitimate threat to Usman. You can't give a guy a title shot that's ranked 10th or 9th or whatever he might be in the division right now. You got to give him you got to get him up there to be in the top 3 before he gets a title shot.
What if they put him in against both Nick and Nate at the same time?
He'd still win probably.
But does that move him up into the top 5? No, I really think that it benefits him to be matched up with Nate. I know you disagree with me, but I just think his ability and where he should be, they can fix those rankings. I mean, they're just manipulated by the UFC anyway, but they need him to be marketable. And I think if he obliterates Nate Diaz, as he most assuredly would, that puts him in a good position to fight somebody in the top 5 and, sell a pay-per-view or probably headline a free one, probably be the next step for him. Yeah. That'll probably be Nate Diaz, I guess.
By the way, I wanted us to answer this question from Brett, the movie guy, and I'm thinking about it because initially I thought, oh, this is my clear answer. I don't know. He says, which fight would you guys want now? Usman versus GSP or Hamzat versus Usman? I know he's been out of the game for a little while here, but I also know he keeps himself in impeccable shape, and he's teased maybe a comeback, like he was interested in fighting Habib. I think I would want GSP versus Usman because then at least you get to talk about greatest of all time versus future GOAT. Well, let me bring in a GOAT. We'll circle back to this one Let me bring in the man, the myth, the legend. I feel so bad that I bothered you in the middle of the night in Abu Dhabi last week, but I forgot you were probably over there
Man,
on
you
the other
ain't
side
got
of the world.
no coup. I'm in the middle of Abu Dhabi trying to handle my business, and you calling me.
I apologize deeply, sir. I don't feel like there's ever a great time to text Dean Thomas because he's so busy. Like he's doing ringside commentary, he's coaching, he's doing reality TV, he's hobnobbing with Dana White. I think you just always got to know that if you're going to start blowing up Dean Thomas's phone, there's probably not a good time, so you just have to do it. How are you, sir? Are you jet lagged at all coming back?
No, I'm not jet lagged at all. Man, I run on discipline. I'm never motivated to do anything, but I run on discipline. But let me tell you this, you're right about this. Anytime, and I always tell people this, anytime is as good or as bad as any other time to call me. So just call me because it's going to be good or bad. It don't matter.
That's what I'm telling you, man. I figured that much. I do want to ask you a couple of questions looking back to last week, but we like to look forward here as well. And we have UFC 268 coming up this Saturday at Madison Square Garden. And we got a rematch. We've got the champ Kamaru Usman fighting Colby Covington for the second time. The first time they fought about 18 months ago, it was actually really close until Usman knocked him out. Colby was doing pretty well for himself. Our panel is split on this one, Dean. Frank and James both have Covington edging it out. I've got Kamaru Usman. To me, I think he's going to look even more dominant than he did the first fight. I'm thinking a second or a third round stoppage. He's very good in rematches. He's clearly gotten better with his hands and with his power. So break the virtual tie here, Dean. Do you like Usman this weekend or Colby?
I like Usman this weekend. Oh, and here's why. I think it's a completely different fight than the first time. I think the first time they fought was based on emotion, and both of them fought very emotionally. I don't think they fought their best fights. I thought they just went out there, they stood in front of each other and boxed. And Usman's the longer guy, which is why he won. But Usman's not the greatest pure boxer in the world, but just a little bit better than Colby. But I think this is a different fight. But one thing that I look at when I look at fighters is the trajectory of how they improve. And if we look at Usman, through the years, you can see Usman's improvements like drastically, and you can identify like all the things that he's gotten better at. And even up until his last couple of fights, he's gotten better at just judging distance and timing and his accuracy. Colby, on the other hand, is to me still the same fighter that he's always been, a pressure fighter. You know, he's a volume fighter, but I don't know if he's gotten better. His opponents haven't even really gotten better. They've gotten older. And you look at his opponents that he's kind of washed out. So, and I think Colby's a very good fighter. He's a damn good fighter, but I just don't know if he's going to have what it takes to get past Usman, a better version of Usman.
Hey, Dean, I want to ask you about the first fight on the card now that it's been moved, Michael Chandler against Justin Gaichi. As a fighter, if you're moved up about an hour and a half, and I'm just guessing, but there's two fights, you know, depending on the finishes and all that kind of stuff, but you were it's kind of the fight after the co-main, and now you're the first fight. As a fighter, does that change your schedule at all?
No. In fact, they're probably more happy now that they're going to get it over with sooner. So I think that's better for them. And plus, even for Gaichi, like Gaichi at some level is probably happy that he's getting full attention from Trevor Whitman and his full people behind him, as opposed to like rushing back from Rose and then trying to get to him. So I think this works out better for Gaichi. And for Chandler, I mean, I think it works out for Chandler as well too. Like Chandler is just like, you know what, I get to get it over it and then enjoy the rest of the fight card. So this is better for me. It's one thing if they made the change like the day of, then you're like, oh, but like they had enough time to really adjust to what they think is going to be good for them.
Dean, can I ask you about your timing? Because when they come to you, when they throw to you during the pay-per-view and they ask you, you know, what you're seeing, do they give you any kind of heads up they're going to be coming to you soon? Because you always nail it. And I'm just curious how that works.
Good point.
No, so
you see like a red light go on or something?
No, it's like I'm constantly evaluating what's going on. And sometimes, like if I have something really good, I'll just tell them, hey, listen, put me on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I'm constantly evaluating the whole thing and just watching. and listening to them and seeing what they may not be seeing. And I tell you right now, man, and I'm going to tell you now, when Paul Felder and DC are on, it's very difficult for me to find stuff that they don't already see, especially Paul Felder. He's so good at that because he's not far removed from the fight game himself, so he sees everything. Joe Rogan, not so much. He's so far removed from the fight game, he doesn't see much, so it's easier to come in when he's there. And that's not a knock on Joe. Joe's still the GOAT, but he's just
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that fight itself, between Gaichi and Chandler. The expectation from a fan is no matter who you think is going to win or who's going to want to win, we're expecting them to put on a show. I mean, this is going to be fireworks. A couple of guys who have wrestling backgrounds, but are probably going to choose not to wrestle and just sling their hands for however long it takes before somebody takes a dirt nap. And I think, guys, if I'm not mistaken, we the three of us we were unanimous on Gaichi, right? We didn't have a dissenting one on that. We look at Gaichi being the more durable guy, I think being very important, because not that Michael Chandler loses often, but all of his previous 4 losses were by TKO, and Gaichi seems like a zombie. He's impossible to knock out. It probably throws with more power as well. So we're looking at Gaichi. How do you see this fight playing out, Dean? And who do you think gets their hand raised?
Yeah, I mean, I can't count Chandler out because he's a big puncher.
Yeah.
And that's most likely his best path of victory is to punch with Gaichi. But that's also what's going to get him in trouble because we know the Gaichi's more durable than Chandler. So like if they throw shots and they both start getting hit with big shots, Chandler's going to feel it more, I think. So he has to be careful. But the one thing we know about Gaichi is that his losses have come from him being outboxed. Besides being outgrappled, he was outboxed. But I don't know if Chandler has the boxing ability to outbox him. He's got punching power, but I don't know if he can outbox Gaichi. So I'm leaning towards Gaichi for these reasons. It's just like he's got an easier path of victory, in my opinion, over Chandler. But Chandler can get it done. He's got to catch him and hurt him and hope to not get caught himself.
Hey, Dean, you were talking about seeing Usman's trajectory and how much he's improved. Have you seen anything like that with Gaichi? I feel like I have, but I'd like to get your opinion on it.
I mean, I think he's gotten a little bit more patient and a little bit more calculated and less wild and fighting for the fans. And that probably has a lot to do with the training that Trevor Whitman does with them and his dedication towards his athletes. Like when you've seen, when he just totally focused on those guys, like you see them getting better. And I think that has a lot to do with it, man. Like you don't realize how much attention to detail plays a big factor in this. And when these guys are getting that much attention and their coaches are scrutinizing that much, you're going to get better. And that's the problem. That's part of the problem with, I think, some of these other fighters is that they're going up against guys that are getting all the attention. I mean, you can be good, but if you're just in a room with good people, you're making mistakes every day that you're never getting corrected on. And I don't care how much you do it and how much push you're getting and how much hard training it was. If you're making mistakes, you're making mistakes. And they're going to come out in the fight. But a good person is going to capitalize on them mistakes. So you need that attention.
Yeah, good points, Dean. And the co-main event is another fight that we've kind of disagreed on and not really sure how to scout. It lasted less than 2 minutes. I mean, what did we really learn from the first Weili fight versus Rose that we can take into this second fight?
The only thing we learned in that first fight is that Rose can win.
Yeah.
Because
true.
Going into that fight, I didn't even think Rose could win. I was like, man, she's going to get beat up. I didn't think she could win. But now we know that Weili is human, first off. I mean, she looked kind of human towards Joanna, but I mean, she was just so awesome in that fight that we forgot. But we know that she's human, and we know that Rose has the ability to put her down. But I still like Rose, or I still like Weili in the pocket. Like when she's in the pocket, man, she's dangerous. She's a power puncher in the pocket, and Rose has to be careful with that.
Yeah, we're joined here by 9-time UFC veteran, coach to the stars, commentator of the stars, Dean Thomas is with us. Dean, I did want to look back at last week out in Abu Dhabi. I know that the three of us were surprised not only by Glover Teixeira winning the belt, but also just how dominant he looked. I mean, that was an incredible performance from a 42-year-old man that I thought it was going to be a lopsided fight against him, and he put on, the performance of his career. Did that surprise you at all? And I ask you that. I already see you shaking your head because and I need to come to Dean for more betting advice because you're usually like
don't come to me. Don't listen. I can tell you how they should win, but I can't execute for them. So that's the thing.
Fair enough.
That fight didn't surprise me at all. In fact, that was how I saw it going. Yeah, Jan Blachowicz is a good fighter, but he's also an old man himself.
That's true.
He has an old man fighting style, the same as Glover does, but Glover's better, and he proved it. He's better on the ground. He was smarter on the feet, and his takedowns were. And Jan's not a wrestler. Jan's a jiu-jitsu guy, so Jan can't really stop a shot. So Glover he's a better fighter than Jan. I think Jan, Glover wins that fight 9 out of 10 times.
Wow.
And so it doesn't surprise me. And at some level, like the whole place was so happy for Glover.
Yeah.
And even I think Jan was.
I think
Jan was like, if I'm going to lose, I'm glad I lost to this guy.
What a great story. This guy just beat me.
I think when he got taken down and he gave up his back, I think he almost kind of was just like, it's better that this guy wins and becomes champion. It's a bigger story. So it almost felt like that. But I will say this though.
Oh man.
I don't think Glover beats Yuri Prochazka.
No, I don't
there's
think so either.
No way he gets past him because there's a definite speed disadvantage that he's going to have that he didn't have against Jan because Jan's an old man too. Jan's 37, 38 years old. So they're relatively the same speed. But when we talk about Yuri Prochazka, his speed is going to be the difference in this fight. And you're going to see a 42-year-old man in there against a real fast dude. It could be ugly.
We always love the insight from Dean Thomas. I mean, a few days ago, he's in United Arab Emirates. I think he's in New York City today. He was telling me he's all over the world, all over the country. Dean, let people know, man, where they can follow you, social media, and I'm assuming we're going to see you at UFC 268. If you have anything else you want to promote.
Well, I'm going to be at UFC 268. I'm doing the morning weigh-in show tomorrow, and you guys can watch that on the YouTube, UFC's YouTube channel and on Fight Pass. Then I'll be on the broadcast analyzing. But other than that, just follow me on all my social media at Dean Thomas. Dean spelled D-I-N Thomas.
I love it, man. Well, enjoy the travel, and we'll be seeing you out there. I mean, he's already in NYC set for the weekend. Have a great card, my friend.
All right, and Frank, I ain't forget about you. I'm still gonna kick your butt.
All right.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna be in contact with you. And listen, I know, like you said, there's never a bad time to call you. So it might be 4 a.m. It might be 4 p.m. Just be on the lookout for it because we got to set this up.
All right.
Oh, good stuff there from Dean. And man, we go rapid fire. We talk about, so Dean is in New York City, ready for UFC 268. Our guy J-Rod, who I love him, but I'm also so envious because this guy gets to jet set to all the big fights. He's out in Vegas, baby, for Canelo and Plant. J-Rod, how are you doing, sir?
I'm great, fellas. What's going on? Yes, it's life is much better 3 hours earlier than it is here in Las Vegas. Yeah.
Can I jump in right away?
Sure.
I've been waiting to talk to you. We haven't gotten to boxing yet. But I got to ask you, could this repeat? I just found out that this was true, that the last time Canelo was up against a major UFC pay-per-view, it was in 2019 when Masvidal fought Nate Diaz. And they held Canelo and his opponent in the locker room, made them wait.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So here they are again.
That is 100% correct. That is one, and it's in the same arena that it was last time at the MGM Grand Arena. Because listen, it's the smallest venue. This fight was so late to get to because T-Mobile Arena, where we usually do the big fights, there's the Bull Riders, the PBRs going on there. The Rolling Stones are at the Raiders concert, so that's out. So there's no room, and all of a sudden here we are at MGM Grand, the grand old lady, the grand dame of arenas. Yes, and I was actually producing that fight for DAZN. And yes, we had to wait a damn hour because Canelo did not want to walk up against that fight. And I don't blame him. And at one point, guys, they actually put on the UFC fight in the arena while we were waiting. So people were watching the UFC fight. They were watching Masvidal, and then when that ended, then Canelo came out. That is 100% correct.
Any chance that happens again? Any chance they do this again?
No, I think Showtime will be a little better. Remember, this is also pay-per-view, so I think at this point, DAZN wasn't pay-per-view technically at the time. So
yeah.
I think they'll time it a little better. I hope so, because we had to really sing and dance for an hour, and we weren't expected to fill for an hour.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is something interesting because we were just talking about, a great story for Glover Teixeira in the UFC. You want to talk about an incredible story, the story of Caleb Plant. I mean, bro, this guy's life story. You want to talk about adversity. I mean, the way that he lost his mother, the way that he lost his 18-month-old daughter. I mean, dude, it's like just unbelievable for him to get on the other side of all of that misery and the tough upbringing, to become, the successful man that he is today. With that said, for as incredible of a story as Caleb Plant is, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I don't think he has too much of a chance in the fight, but let's talk a little bit about that first, Jim, in Caleb Plant, because when people see this guy, and I've had a chance to interview him before, not before this fight, but before his fight with Caleb Truax, and look, I was just really blown away. I had an incredible time talking with him. He's a really confident guy, and it doesn't seem like the big moments in boxing phase him. And I can understand why they don't phase him, being all that he's gone through in his life. I'm sure he's not scared of Canelo, given all the adversity he's had to come through. So, for someone like yourself who, you produce and you dive headfirst into these stories, being able to cover a guy like Caleb Plant, you don't always get someone with just this much meat on the bone when it comes to unbelievable stories to tell.
Yeah, and what kind of throws me a little bit is, again, there's so much for him to be angry about. There's so much for him to be damaged about, and yet there is kind of like there's a calmness. There's kind of a peace to him. It's sort of it's a dichotomy, if you will. And I think an important thing for him is who he's married to. He's married to Jordan Plant, who is a boxing commentator. She works for Fox. She works for PBC as well. So I think that, maybe there's some media training. There's some way to be able to speak to the media. And every time I've engaged with him, he's been very, I wouldn't say confrontational, but he will engage you. If you ask him a question, he'll be like, well, what do you think about that? Where, when we asked him about him, talking about Canelo's, and Eddie Reynoso and all the the steroid talk and everything like that, he said, hey, am I telling a lie? Isn't there steroids in that camp? What do you think? And he kind of puts it on us. And I think he's a brilliant strategist in that sense of how to deal with the media. And I don't know how much Jordan Plant's had to do with it, but I love talking to him because you come out of it thinking, wow, this is a guy that could probably do what we do when he decides stop beating up people.
Now, Jim, we've talked a lot about legacy today on the MMA side. I'm just curious of your thoughts on Canelo's legacy. Like, he lost young to Mayweather. He's been pretty dominant all around since. Where does his legacy stand with you? What does he have left to prove at this point? Does he have still more room to go at the tail end of his career?
I think he's got plenty more to go to. I mean, I think right now, and they mentioned it yesterday at the press conference, he has graduated from trying to be the best Mexican fighter ever to now trying to be one of the best fighters ever. Forget where they're from. And I think he's at that point, and he's very concentrated on making history. I mean, right now he is Thanos looking for that last Infinity Stone to unify at 168. And then when he's done with that, then you go up to 175. Remember that fight where we had to wait for an hour? He won the 175 belt here, so he's already he's dipped his toe in the water there. He's very smart. There's a lot of guys waiting for him at 175. And still there's still guys at 168 like David Benavidez, maybe Charlo wants to get in there as well. So I think there's plenty for him to get to. He's not done, but I think what he wants to do is maybe, hey, champion at 154, champion at 60, champion at 168, champion at 75. So I think there's still more hurdles to climb, and he is so into the training. I've never seen a guy so committed. He's never out of shape. Even when he's not fighting, he's never out of shape. He's always ready to go. The golf that he's into, I think, keeps his mind right. and lets him then go just be completely evil and mean and hurt people, and then comes back and plays golf, I think there's still a lot of Canelo left.
Now, I got to ask you, J-Rod, because, of course, Jim Rodriguez, he also hosts 5 Reasons to Bet. And, man, I'm so lucky to have people in my life like J-Rod, Lee Sterling, Barry Barger, my friends from the Daily Stakes. So I need you to help us find some value here in this fight. Now, if in the off chance, I don't know if you are picking Caleb Plant, then people can get incredible odds on that. But for those who are in the Canelo camp, you're looking at, minus 900 or even minus 1,000 I've seen in some places. So this is the type of fight, J-Rod, where we're probably looking for props, yes?
Yeah, the one thing that I like the over-under rounds. It's 9.5. Now, Canelo said he actually said this. He's like, I'm going to end this 6 to 8 rounds. I'm going to end this. But I think this is going to get into the 10th round. I think the 10th round seems to be the magic round there. And I love over 9.5. You're minus 110, so you're not paying a lot of juice on it, 10 cents on the dollar. I love that Canelo wins in the 10th round. It's 11-1. I like that. I like either fighter wins in the 10th round. It's 10-1. So I think we're going to get into the championship round. I think Caleb Plant, not because I think Caleb Plant's going to pull a sort of a page out of Mayweather's book. And that I think Caleb Plant, what he does really well is he moves. He can dodge. And you could see it all through his training. They were working a lot on moving, making him walk, dodging and making him walk around, making Canelo walk around that ring. That's what Mayweather did. Now, no one's Mayweather. No one's going to be able to do it. And eventually Canelo's going to get to Caleb Plant, and he's going to hit him with those body shots. But I think it's going to have to be trying to wear Canelo down, make him walk around that ring, make him run around that ring, and then hit him with the body to try to just see if those hands come down. That's the only chance I think Caleb Plant's got. But I see rounds on this. I really do.
I love it. Jim Rodriguez, he's out in Vegas on location for Canelo versus Plant. Let people know, do you have any 5 Reasons to Bets coming up before the weekend, and where can people find you on social media?
Well, there's one right now. We've got about 30 minutes before we get Thursday Night Football for that classic old AFC East showdown between the Jets and the Colts. Mike White insanity. I don't think you should. By the way, I don't think anybody should be saying white insanity. We've had too much white insanity in the world. Let's relax with white insanity. Okay, please, no white insanity. But I think Mike White's jersey's in the Hall of Fame. So, the number with the show, we got Taylor Mathis, we got Alf, we got Ethan Skolnick and myself. It's Colts minus 10, 45.5. So what did we pick? You can go right now to 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can get our picks and get into the Thursday night delight. By the way, our girl Taylor Mathis, 12-2, picking Thursday night games this year. She's blowing us out of the water, 12-2. So she's got to know what she's doing. Go hit us up here on 5 Reasons to Bet, and you can get her picks. You can get all our picks and what we think tonight for Jets Colts.
Oh, maybe she needs to be my new.
And no white insanity.
No white insanity. Thank you so much, J-Rod. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the fights.
She's killing it. All right, boys. Be good.
Wow. All right, guys. But before we get out of here, let's quickly go through our kudos and complaints for this episode. I'll keep my kudos very simple. I'm giving my kudos to the UFC. I mean, we've complained for a lot of weeks about filler fight cards. The UFC is giving us 4 title fights, even though one of them was, whatever was it, an interim title? It's stupid, but still, 4 title fights in an 8-day span. I'm giving my kudos to the UFC. James, I'll go to you next.
Man, you stole my kudos, but yeah, I was going to say this has been a great 7 days for the UFC. 2 pay-per-view quality cards, and they didn't even charge you for the first card. So you're really getting 2 pay-per-views for the price of 1 in a matter of the 7 days. I don't know if there'll ever be a stretch for a long time of that, 2 pay-per-view level cards, and you're getting 1 for free. So kudos to the UFC. Sorry, Alex, you stole mine, but all good.
All good. Frank, what about you?
My kudos goes to Glover Teixeira. I mean, when old guys are successful in sports they're not supposed to be able to continue being successful at their age, I always celebrate that. So kudos to the old man from Danbury.
I love it. All right, so my complaint, it's a petty one, and this is kind of the opposite of Frank's kudos. My complaint is Jan Blachowicz for blowing up a 5-fight parlay that would have won me a good chunk of change I come down to the main event having hit 4 out of 5, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy work here. Jan Blachowicz, he lost. Oh no! So luckily, I didn't spend too much money on the parlay, but I would have won a lot of money on the parlay. So my complaint is Jan Blachowicz, who didn't look like he got off the plane in Abu Dhabi for that fight. So what about you, James?
My complaint goes to Colby Covington. I'm a fan of him as a fighter, but man, he does say some cringe things. This week, it was at the end of his rant, but he ended up talking about Dustin Poirier's wife and his kid. Completely unnecessary, completely over the line, completely random. I mean, I know they have beats, but I mean, his focus should be on Usman anyway right now. So talking about Adesanya, talking about Poirier's family, it's just really out of line, and he doesn't need it. I mean, he can play the villain in more creative ways than to cross the line in that way. And usually he is fairly creative, but I just didn't like that, talking about another fighter's family. It's just unnecessary.
My complaint is with Showtime and with the UFC for making me have to spend $1,000 in one day and I'll miss something in either event. I mean, I don't understand why in the hell they have to pick the same. What's wrong with the 13th? Why can't Canelo fight on the 13th? I don't understand what's going on. So,
I don't know.
I mean, it's absurd and it's infuriating. This is a historic boxing match and one of the best UFC cards in a long time. What's a fight fan to do?
Well said. That'll do it for us. Huge thanks to everybody who joined us live, or if you're joining us on the replay on YouTube, do us a favor and smash the like button. Please hit the thumbs up button for us. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the 5 Reasons Sports Network on YouTube. Not only can you get combat sports content from the three of us and from our guy, Jonathan Ramlakan, who does post-fight shows. I'm sure he's going to be very busy, very late Saturday night, talking not only about Canelo, but talking about UFC 268 as well. So make sure you subscribe to the network. And guys, again, I mentioned it near the beginning of the show. I'll mention it here at the end of the show. To get the audio only version, we've been on Spotify for a long time, but we are now also on Apple Podcasts, which, this is what I know some people use Spotify. I do some things on Spotify, but I get most of my shows on Apple Podcasts. So if you search for us on the Apple Podcast app, search for 5 Rounds, and you'll see, as you can see here, the orange and black fist logo. That's us. Please subscribe to our channel, and that way you can not only watch us, you can listen to us. Probably better not to see some of these faces here. I won't single anybody out, but it's the audio only. Listen to it in the car. It's a very, very beautiful thing.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
No, I was talking about me. I was talking about myself. You guys are both beautiful. So huge shout out to Frank Zaffere. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Frank Real Frank.
Z. It doesn't matter. Nobody follows. Who cares?
But you figured out how to log into your account again, though, right? So you're back on it.
I did. Yeah. So I was back on it. Yeah.
So he's no longer locked out. And make sure you follow James at James Walker NFL. Follow me at Alex Donno. We will talk to you guys again. And I think we're going to be doing our show next week on Friday instead of Thursday, because we're going to be out live at the BKFC event at the James L. Knight Center. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm going to be hobnobbing at the crypto experience on the 10th, 11th, and 12th. Going to become a billionaire. Gonna quintuple my crypto holdings, and then on Friday we're gonna broadcast live before the BKFC. So that's gonna be really, really good. So we'll talk to you guys next week here on another episode of 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.